In this Marvel's Midnight Suns hero video, we're going to be taking a look at Doctor Strange. He is one of the 2 support classes that you get near the beginning of the game, and I want to run you guys through the cards that I like to use from him and the style of play available to him, as well as some of the things that he can do. So first up, let's take a look at his passive ability, which is Greater Good. This gives him a chance to generate heroism every turn, so you're going to get more heroism on average when he's in your group than maybe some other characters. And this works really well if you have very heroism-hungry characters. For instance, like Ghost Rider uses tons of heroism for his attacks, so having someone like Doctor Strange in your party is really good to have if you need to generate heroism. Another particularly interesting thing about Doctor Strange is he has an ability called Enhanced, which makes his abilities more powerful as you accumulate more and more heroism. So not only do you want to generate heroism when you're Doctor Strange, but you also want to hang on to it a little bit longer than you would maybe some other characters. And you're not going to hang on to it for real long when you're playing him, but generally what you're going to do is use abilities like on turn 2, before you dump your heroism into some big skills, you're going to use his abilities to get the enhanced effect of them, and then dump your heroism immediately after that into the big hitting skills. Now, as I mentioned, he is primarily a support class, and the reason for that are 2 cards specifically, Blessing of Vishanti and Agamotto's Gaze, and I want to jump into those cards now and sort of explain how they benefit other characters and why it's so valuable to have him in your group sometimes. So first, let's take a look at Blessing of Vishanti. What this card does is it applies extra damage to all the attack cards in your hand, and if you upgrade it, it applies it to the rest for the rest of the mission. And this stacks, meaning that if you apply for the rest of the mission, you redraw these cards and apply this again to it, it'll get even more damage and even more damage. So as the mission goes on, if you have these cards in your deck, you're going to get stronger and stronger, which is great, because sometimes missions can go long, and usually you get weaker the longer they go. This allows you to kind of keep an even keel. And another thing that's really great about this ability is the damage is applied to each attack on an ability card. A lot of characters in the game like Wolverine, Blade, Spider-Man, and even some characters like Magic and Captain America that have big AoEs, or Captain Marvel even, will get damage from each hit. So if you're like talking about Blade and he's got like 4 hits with Daywalker, then each hit will gain the extra damage, so it's really, really effective in that sense. This is absolutely invaluable near the beginning of the game where your heroes don't have their decks optimized and you don't know what cards to use, and even if you do know what cards to use, you haven't acquired them yet. This can help put you ahead in a lot of fights, and it's really good to bring Doctor Strange early on for that reason, for this card alone. And for a similar reason, Agamotto's Gaze is really good. What this allows you to do is pull back the last 2 attack cards played and have them in your hand, and then you start next turn with 4 card plays instead of 3. So you're kind of gaining back these cards that are good. So a lot of times at the beginning of the game, you don't have very optimal decks, as I mentioned, and sometimes you have really powerful cards and some weak ones, and you want to bring those powerful cards back because you used them at the beginning of the game in order to give yourself a good start. You can bring them back and use them again instead of having to default to your weaker cards, which is great. And then it sets you up really nicely for the next turn, where you have an additional card play and you gain heroism from using the card as well. So it's just a fantastic card to have. You don't need it all the time, but you definitely need it sometimes, and when you do need it, it's really good to have, particularly around the early parts of the game. And another ability that I really like to use in my deck with Doctor Strange to give him some damage is Bolt of Ballhack. And the reason that I like this ability compared to some of the other abilities that he has that deal damage, because he has some really high damaging abilities, particularly when you have a lot of heroism, is because it doesn't cost any heroism. So you're able to use the ability, maintain your heroism to keep your damage high, and then dump your heroism with another character, which I really like. And it's a very, very high damaging direct attack that just gets stronger and stronger, and it also generates heroism, which is great. Another really good one to have, particularly early on, is Winds of Watum. This gives you a quick knockback, and knockback is very effective at the beginning of the game and killing enemies easily. It's less so as you move on through the game, and it's better to have an ability that deals some damage and knockback, or knockback forcefully, because knockbacks stop being as useful sometimes depending on the scenario. But what's really great about this ability is when you're enhanced, when you have at least 3 heroism, once it's upgraded, you gain Forceful Knockback, which is a really strong knockback, which deals more damage, allows you to knock things into other things. And because it's quick, you almost always get a kill out of this when it's Forceful Knockback. You can knock enemies off maps, and that'll refund the card play, which is fantastic. And another card I want to talk about is Astral Meditation. You won't see it in my deck here just because I am someone who doesn't use like consumable items when I play games for some reason, and just don't. But there are some really, really fantastic combat items in Marvel's Midnight Suns. Some that give you like a really good edge in combat, but they cost resources to craft and they're one-time use only. But what Astral Meditation allows you to do is refund those combat items that you use in combat. So you can make some really, really powerful combat items, use them, and then cast this card, and then you gain them back so you didn't waste them. This allows you to use your most favorite and powerful combat items every mission without having to keep crafting them, which is amazing. A lot of combat items, for instance, give you free plays, and free anything in this game is extremely, extremely powerful. So this is a very, very powerful card that I just wanted to bring your attention to, that if you were playing 100% optimized, you'd absolutely have this in your deck. But since I just can't be bothered with, crafting combat items and dealing with that, and I haven't really researched it at all in my game, I don't have it in mind. But you really, really should consider putting it in there, particularly if you find combat items that you like. In terms of party composition, he works best with characters that have multiple attacks with their cards or large AoEs, since it'll hit everything in a large AoE. So these are like Blade with his strike ability or Daywalker ability, or like Wolverine's attacks. Most of attacks hit in chains, so you're going to get, each attack's going to get buffed there. That's really strong. Or Captain America's AoE, or Spider-Man, he has a chain attack that's really good. But he buffs everyone really well. Like it doesn't matter if you have just regular attacks or those. I mean, obviously those benefit more, but he's really good with just about any group. So putting him in any group will make it so that your damage dealers deal more damage, and it's just absolutely good to have. And because Augmoto's Gaze allows you to pull those cards back after you've cast them and can buff their damage again when you pull them back, you can just keep stacking damage buffs, making your DPS just hit harder and harder and harder as combat goes on. A lot of scenarios, if you can't keep up with the enemy reinforcements, you eventually fall behind, but these two cards will allow you to stay even and get stronger and stronger, so it's easier to kill more and more enemies as time goes on, and that can kind of tip the balance in your favor sometimes. Another thing that I really like about Doctor Strange too is that his Blessing of Vishanti ability isn't like strengthened or a modifier that you can't stack multiple copies of. It just makes the duration longer, doesn't increase the damage. So if you bring someone like Nico and use her blood magic to strengthen your DPS character like Iron Man, and then use Blessing of Vishanti to make Iron Man's attacks hit even stronger, you didn't stack on top of each other and get in each other's way. You both help the damage of Iron Man. So you can bring him with someone like Nico at the same time and get extra damage, which is fantastic. So that wraps up our video on Doctor Strange. I hope that sort of helps you get into the rhythm with him. He's a very fantastic character to bring in your group, particularly if you have a focused damage dealer like Iron Man or Captain Marvel or even Blade to some degree. If you have characters that you are going to be pulling their cards and dealing damage primarily with them, he's great for helping them deal more damage and is a great bring along in any party. Let me know if you guys have any questions, and if there's anything that I missed, be sure to put it in the comments below so that other people can get that helpful information.